Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Collective security would be really a good thing right now. For those of you who are not aware of collective security and what it would mean if we actually had it, which we don't, the League of Nations and the United Nations were originally intended to be mechanisms of collective security. They have failed miserably in that regard, miserably. They have not done that at all. In order to have collective security, there needs to be an agreement that if one nation behaves inappropriately, if one nation is an aggressor, then all the other nations of the world must, after threatening it, arise, one and all, and crush that nation, attack that nation, and bring it down. That is what should be happening to Israel. Collective security is a way of maintaining justice and human rights. We have no such mechanism, sadly, but that is what we need. We need collective security more now than at any other time in my life. We need some body of nations to come together and to agree that what Israel is doing right now in Gaza is a violation of international law. Sadly, there is no such agreement. Ideally, collective security would involve all the nations of the world. But even if one or two nations, and I would predict that Israel and the United States would be among them, refused to cooperate, it doesn't matter. The other nations of the world would make sure that those nations fall in line as well. The problem right now is that the countries which are opposing the current terrorist campaign by Israel in Gaza have relatively small militaries in comparison to the US. Under collective security, that would not be the case. The concept of collective security would ensure that the militaries of all of those countries are enough to crush any country, including Israel, and especially including the US. I wish we had it. We could have prevented the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, and now the terrorist campaign in Gaza. We could have, but could have is not a very pleasant term to use, is it? Because it implies that we really have not been doing our job as a community of nations. In fact, there really is no community of nations, is there? Not really. You have a few bullies, and they basically run everything. The US is one of those bullies. Israel is another. Russia is yet another. They have the ability to manipulate the world to their own advantage. And that is what Israel is doing in Gaza, and historically, what Israel has done in Palestine. I just watched an interview conducted by a Norwegian journalist of an Israeli official who basically hedged on everything. Any question asked to him, he simply evaded. Then ultimately, when he couldn't evade anymore, he said, well, I am really not qualified to answer that question. That needs to be decided by people higher up than I am. Yeah, I'm sure that is true. I'm sure that is true. I'm sure that the Israeli government would put somebody in the place of being interviewed on Norwegian television who didn't have all their facts in order. I'm sure that must be the case. Of course, he had his facts in order. Again, he was simply hedging. He was trying to get by. He was playing games, a tactic which Israel has used since its inception. The Norwegian journalist, in the end, could do nothing. I mean, you can't force words out of a person's mouth. When he said, I have no authority to make that decision, that it has to come from people higher up, then what else could the Norwegian journalist say? Nothing. And so I am really discouraged by what's happening in the world today, because a system of collective security would resolve these problems. And yet we have none. We have a few bullies on the block, and they are the ones who try allegedly to keep the house in order. And so the US, through the Monroe Doctrine, Israel, through its own policy of state terrorism, tries to do that. But are they really doing that? No. They are making sure to bend the rest of the world to their own political advantage. And so we are living in very difficult times, times that I would never have conceived of in the past, times that I never actually even thought were possible, where a single country, Israel, is ruthlessly bombing and attacking a territory of indigenous people, the indigenous people of the land that Israel now occupies, and calling them Nazis, of all things, Nazis. And nobody can call them accountable. You can have the student protests, which are nice. You can have the conscientization of people like myself, which I guess is nice. You can have other nations protesting against what Israel is doing, which again is also nice. But none of those has any power to stop Israel. Israel has nukes. And given that it has nukes, given that it has that Iron Dome that was given to it by that ridiculous monster, Donald Trump, it can basically evade responsibility for the most part. For the most part. So when Iran tried to attack Israel after Israel provoked them by attacking the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria, then the world had to sit by and do nothing as Israel came back and attacked Iran. And who knows what they may do in the future. The first action should have been taken right after Israel bombed the embassy in Damascus. That's when it should have happened. But it didn't. Why? Because we have no collective security. And even if there were some nations, and there were, who strongly objected to what Israel was doing, what could they possibly do? The answer is nothing. So they had to sit back and watch this thing play out. Watch Israeli foreign policy or Israeli state terrorism play out without being able to defend the innocent Iranians from Israel. They could not do anything. And so right now, again, in Gaza, as Rafah is being attacked and being barraged from all directions, even to the point of Egypt, sending a warning that, look, you have invaded our territory. Does Israel care? No, Israel doesn't care. Israel is in charge. Israel has the power. Why? Because Israel has the backing of the world's only superpower, the United States. So however much other nations may despise the actions of Israel, it can't do a thing. It can't do a thing because Israel is basically, in the current political climate, essentially invulnerable. The World Court can press charges against Benjamin Netanyahu and other officials in his government and possibly in the IDF. But again, how can they get him? The World Court does not have the authority to go into any country and to arrest people. It has to wait until those officials are in a member country, which Israel is not. And then that member country can turn those people who are convicted or charged over to the World Court in The Hague, in the Netherlands. Now, what is the chance of that happening? I would say hardly any at all. Why? Because it is Israel, the country with the right to exist. Apparently, the only country with the right to exist. Again, since I've never heard any other country make that claim. And as I've said before, no country has a right to exist, including my own, the United States. Countries exist or they don't. That is it. The notion of a right to exist is simply a way of bullying, which again is what Israel does on a regular basis and makes sure that its power is used in a way that benefits itself, not that benefits the world. But again, if we had a true system of collective security, that would not be the case. Israel would not have power over other nations. No country would have power over other nations. Only the body of nations, all nations ideally, would have power over one nation or another because it alone would have the ability to crush a nation which violated international law or which started a war without consent from some type of world body. I would say ideally some type of world government. So that brings me to a different but related topic: world government, or perhaps world governance, although I prefer world government because it's more precise. For collective security to work, there needs to be a world government. If not, the ability of collective security to function adequately will be very, very limited. Under a world government, that world government could enforce its wishes, could demand other countries to conform. And if a country refused, under the principle of collective security, the other nations of the world would literally crush that country, possibly destroy it. No country would want to be destroyed, at least I don't think so. And so presumably, collective security would work because power talks, militia talks. And if the government of the world told a particular country to stop committing atrocities, that country would know that if it disobeyed that government, it too would be crushed. There would be no more Israel. And so, no, Israel would at that point not only not have a right to exist, Israel would simply not exist. It would not exist. In any event, the situation, of course, is very depressing. Day after day after day, Israel violates the wishes of the international community. After Joe Biden said, no, we will not provide you with weapons to attack Rafah, Netanyahu came out and said, okay, if Biden won't do it, we will do it on our own. And the sad thing is that Israel, at least for now, can do that. Israel would benefit from U.S. support, but Israel does not need it. Israel can invade any place it wants, including Rafah, without consent from any other nation and without the help of any other nation. So my view, as usual, of the immediate future is pessimistic, maybe even cynical. I do not really think that things will play out very well. I hope I am wrong, but given what Israel is doing right now, given the conflict which has erupted between Israel and the rest of the world, basically, except for the United States, I can't see how the future is that bright. I just can't see it. Do I hope I'm wrong? Yes and no. Yes, because I don't want to see more people suffer. No, because I would like to see the capitalist world system brought down by any means necessary. And if it takes collective security, which we don't have, to bring Israel down, to bring the US down, then so be it. I would support that, although I would not desire it. I would desire to see nations that were more compliant and willing to go along with the wishes of the world. But again, that is not what we see today. That is not what we see today at all. For the time being, this has been Mark, by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.